Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to New Jersey and we're going to have a look at another collaboration beer. So out of the two breweries involved in this one, it is actually only the away brewery that's featured on the channel before. I found one or two of their beers over in Copenhagen a couple of months back, or maybe a year or so ago, come to think of it. But both of these breweries are very highly regarded in New Jersey beer circles. Now, the beer itself is a very popular style of beer at the moment. It is a style that both of these breweries are known to produce very, very well, and it was one that was recommended to me by one of Dave's local beer retailers, I guess we can say. So, quite curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us, actually. So, hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. And definitely cool to feature some New Jersey breweries for you here on the channel again for the first time in what feels like a good little while. But yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to a little place called Little Ferry, which is in New Jersey, a bit north of where we are, close to Newark. It's kind of to the west of the northern part of Manhattan, which obviously is over in New York, but that gives you a rough idea. But we're going to have a look at my first beer from Brix City Brewing. So this particular beer is called Solid Gold Jams. It comes in at 8% ABV. It's a New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA, and it's also brewed in collaboration with Magnify Brewing Co, who are from Fairfield in Essex County, which is actually closer to where we are in Raleigh in New Jersey at the moment. It's quite close to Newark, in fact. But yeah, very first time Brix City Brewing are going to feature on the channel, and this is the third or so time that Magnify have been on the channel, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we get on. Definitely cool to introduce some new New Jersey breweries to you here on the channel as well. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the breweries involved here before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Magnify Brewing before, and also my future reviews that hopefully I can do from Brix City Brewing. Very first time they're featuring on the channel, as I mentioned to you, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the American playlist, and who knows, if I get enough American beers on there, I might well make review lists for the different states as well. We'll just need to see. But you can also check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, which I do recommend you do, because there are some really interesting things up on the channel these days. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about the breweries. We'll start off with Brix City Brewing, since they are the home brewery in this case. So yeah, Brix City Brewing, as I mentioned to you already, are based in Little Ferry, which is in the northern part of New Jersey, and the company was founded by high school friends Pete Reuter and Joe Del Calzo back in 2015. So Pete had been in the army and spent 2 years in Germany, which exposed him to different styles of beer, because we know Brauhaus Brewing is over there and it's great, I love it. But during Pete's time in the army, Joe was actually studying for a degree in accountancy and working part-time. But before officially founding the brewery, Peter was working for his family's masonry company while Joe was doing real estate appraisals. But both were a bit unsure about what they wanted to do with themselves in the longer term, but they both shared a passion for beer, and they ended up purchasing a home brewing kit together and developing a plan to start their own business. So their beers were very well received by friends and family, and they continued to learn more about brewing different styles and things like this by visiting breweries across the country and reading information that was available on the internet. But Pete also did an internship at Chelsea Brewing over in Manhattan as well, which kind of showed him really how the whole industry was working and things like this. But the guys ran into several obstacles when they were looking for a location for the brewery, but both men are actually from Hasbrook Heights in Bergen County in New Jersey, and the brewery can be found on Alson Way, and they spent several months renovating this premises prior to opening their doors in May of 2015. But they've continued to develop the brewery's infrastructure over the last few years, and both founders are still involved in the recipe development and brewing side of things. They've got an on-site tap room these days, which is open 7 days a week, and it seems to be very popular actually. But the name Brix City is apparently a nod to pre-prohibition Newark and its nickname as the Brix City, or the Brix City, sorry. And BX is also the sugar content of a solution and a measurement of alcohol strength. I think that must be an American thing, because I never came across that when I was studying chemistry over in Scotland and Germany. So yeah, maybe that's an American thing, because I don't know that. But as of September 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 480 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And they do a lot of IPAs from what I see, but they do a variety of other styles as well actually. So a fairly well-rounded brewery from what I saw when I was researching them. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Brix City Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn a bit more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then to Magnify Brewery, who are the away brewery in this case. So Magnify Brewery, as I mentioned to you already, are based in Fairfield in Essex County in New Jersey, which is just to the northwest of Newark, and the brewery was founded back in 2014 by Eric Ruta. Now, Eric is originally from Ridgewood in New Jersey, but he studied environmental science and philosophy at Bates College in Lewiston up in Maine, which is very close to Portland, and apparently it was the Portland beer scene that inspired him. I mean, obviously you've got Bissell Brothers and Maine Brewing Company and Allagash and folk like that up there who are very, very good in my experience. But apparently he worked in a low-level marketing job at Baxter Brewing in Lewiston to get some insight into the business, and he said that he really grew to love the community between the restaurants and the breweries and things like this. But when he decided that he wanted to start his own company, he recruited Eric Carla, who had previously worked at Almanac and Speakeasy, and together they drew up a business plan. But they opened up the brewery in May of 2015, and it can be found in the Junction Business Park in Fairfield, with Essex County being chosen because it wasn't really a well-known beer location, and Eric said that he wanted to magnify his local area's profile for beer, hence the brewery name. But in the first year they produced around 1,300 barrels, which I don't know what that's going to be. It's going to be somewhere in the region of about 25,000 litres, something like that, maybe 25,000 litres for those of you who don't use Freedom units. But the beer was really received very, very well, and so they decided to rent a second premises for storage in 2016 so they could expand the fermentation capacity. And they also bought a canning line. They converted to canning, through buying a canning line that year as well. But over the last few years, they've been progressively brewing more beers, trying different recipes and things like this, and also expanding the brewery infrastructure. But as of September 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 715 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and they are known for producing a few different styles, but still quite a lot of New England hazy IPAs, a few sours and things like that, and you will find the odd kind of big boy from these guys as well. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Magnify Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, again, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a wee bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a wee look at the beer itself. So I'll just wipe the sweat off the can. As I said, it's very hot here in New Jersey at the moment, but you can see the artwork on this one is pretty kind of interesting. It's pretty bling, I have to say, if we can say that. So yeah, Brix City Brewing on the top of the can there, solid gold jams, which is nice, and you can see on the back here, it shows you that it's brewed in collaboration in Brix City with Magnify Brewing Company, and as we mentioned earlier, this one is an 8% New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So this one is 1 American pint, which is 473 millilitres, or as the Americans call it, I think it's 16 fluid ounces. I'm probably going to learn the fluid ounce conversion by the time I'm over here. I always make fun of the freedom units a little bit because to me they just don't make sense. Just use the metric system, guys. It's based on water, you know. But this one is hopped with Citra, Mosaic, and Nelson Sauvin. So Citra, Mosaic are both American, both 14% alpha acid. Citra is going to give you that little bit of grapefruit and passion fruit, but it's also going to give you a good little bit of kind of lemon limey character, sometimes a wee bit of lychee and stuff like this as well. Mosaic is going to give you a big juicy kind of tangerine type note, but then Nelson Sauvin comes from New Zealand. It's about 16% alpha acid, and it's going to give you these lovely big kind of white, green, grapey type notes. Very, very distinctive hop. So quite a classic hop lineup on this one, in fact. But yeah, let's get this beer out into the glass and see what it's all about. Hopefully, I've been struggling to get the cans open here in the US, but there we are. So there we go. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. Give it a wee bit more of an aggressive pour, then we'll get some head on the thing. There we are. That'll do it. And let me just rebalance the can. The can got a little bit of a dent, which is why I've got the quarter down here holding it up. But yeah, before the head disappears on this one then, you can see that the beer, I think we've got maybe about 2/3 of the beer, or maybe 3/4 out into the glass. But you can see that when this beer poured, it had about a half finger of a frothy, I would say kind of cream coloured head. You can see that the bubbles on the surface of the beer are quite medium, and then it just gets a little bit more foamy the further up the head that you go. But in terms of colour, this one's actually quite a nice rich yellow. Reminds me of a kind of mango juice or something like that. I always like comparing the appearance of New England IPAs to different fruit juices because that's just what it really reminds me of. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour too. But you don't often have to care about that when it comes to New England hazy IPAs. It is mainly about the type of malts and things that you use. But yeah, one of the richer coloured ones, I mean at 8% ABV, this one, the level of haze that you have in this beer is quite expected, to be honest with you. It's not the soupiest and gloopiest of New England IPAs that I've come across before, but you know, it is kind of around what you would expect. So remember, the level of haze in these beers depends on the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree what yeast you use. It can vary from brewery to brewery and recipe to recipe. But in terms of the appearance of this one, it's kind of what you'd expect for the style. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones just going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it does look pretty nice, and it is pretty much what you would expect. So yeah, this looks pretty good actually. So, I think we've said everything we need to about the appearance of this one. Let's have a wee look at the aroma then and see what it's going to have in store for us. Oh yeah, that smells pretty nice. Yeah, for me, this is kind of interesting. This is a little bit more of a wheaty leaning New England. And as I've said before, for me there are sort of 6 different directions or 6 different things you should think about when it comes to the malty and yeasty side of a New England IPA. So you've got kind of farmhousey, yeasty character, riding and grainy character as well. Those are a bit more common in American brewed New England IPAs in my experience. But then you've got wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and also the sweeter side of things too. And those are a bit common both in American type ones and pretty much everywhere else. For me, a lot of the rest of the world New England IPAs have evolved on the more oaty and creamy and wheaty and bitey side of things. But when I smell this one, to me, it smells as if it leans more toward the wheaty side of things. It has got a good little bit of bite to it. You also get quite a little bit of oatiness out of this one too. And the oaty character is quite interesting because it is quite creamy, but you do get a little bit of dryness out of that. And oats are always usually quite a good indicator of how fresh your New England IPA is. Essentially, the creamier they taste and smell, the fresher the beer is, the drier they are, the older the beer is. It's a kind of relative measure, if you like. But yeah, let's kind of break the aroma of this one down a wee bit and describe it a bit more in depth for you. So for me, this one, as I said, it is a little more of a wheaty bitey New England, but certainly the backbone of the beer, you've got a good little bit of a kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there, I certainly do get a nice little bit of, there's a very slight woody character to this one, also a wee bit of kind of Jacob's cream cracker as well. Yeah, definitely a nice little bit of Jacob's cream cracker coming out of this one. And then on top of that, you start to get all the kind of bready notes. So yeah, there's a little tiny touch of like a wholemeal brown bread, but that's very, very minimal. Then you start to get the fluffy white bread, and you can also smell the wheat just densifying out this beer. At the back of the nose, you get quite a lot of sort of wheaty bitiness coming out of this one, but you can smell that more dense, wheaty white bready character in this beer. And then yeah, as I said, you have a good little bit of oaty character to this one, but this, for me, this is really a very wheat-leaning New England IPA for sure. So you do get a little bit of oaty creaminess out of this one, but it's also got a little touch of dryness to it as well. So yeah, nice oaty creaminess, but as I say, a good little bit of dryness there too. I'm not getting too much in the way of like sweetness out of this one, which is kind of unusual actually for an 8%er. The American beers I've always found are a little bit sweeter than the European ones. But yeah, I'm not getting too much in the way of sweetness from this particular example of a New England IPA, but still interesting. For me, the sweeter side of things in this beer, you do have a little tiny touch of a Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing, but it really is not overly pronounced, to be honest with you. This beer really does lean more toward being wheaty and bitey and very bright and floral in its green component too. So I think on that note we can go to the hoppy side of things. For me, you do have a little touch of earthiness in the green component to this beer. That's most likely to be the Mosaic, but then you've got a big, bright floral aromaticity. I wouldn't describe it as being especially spicy, but yeah, you do have a little bit of that going on in this one. So a little, very bright floral aromaticity in this beer, nice little bit of kind of grassy zestiness as well. But remember, with New England IPAs, you have to think about what type of hopping you're doing with these. So if you think about a brewing process, you have three types of hoppings. Let's assume a 90-minute wort boil. In the first hour of the wort boil, you've got early addition hopping, which gives you mainly bitterness, and that translates to very deep and dank flavour and aroma. You've got late addition hopping within the last half hour of the wort boil, which will give you a little bit of bitterness, but mainly focuses on flavour and aroma, and that's going to give you a very bright, floral and grassy kind of green component. Dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, that's going to give you all flavour and aroma, and again, a very bright flavour and aroma in fact. So all of that should be quite apparent in this one. So New England IPAs tend to rely on late addition and dry hopping, whereas West Coast IPAs use all three, hence why they're a bit deeper and danker in the aroma. The deeper, danker characters are going to dominate, of course, and that's just chemistry, you know, it's more time to extract a chemical using heat is the basic principle there. But yeah, big, bright, floral aromatic note out of this one. It does have a wee bit of dankness to it as well, in fairness, but yeah, not as kind of piney and resinous as you might expect. On the fruity side of things then, let's look at that. So for me, the fruity side of this beer is it is what you'd expect if you know these hops, and these are quite classic ones, to be honest with you. So you certainly get a little bit of that stronger grapefruit from the Citra and the more pungent passion fruit there as well. I'm also getting quite a little bit of the kind of more juicy, ripe mango. It's almost kind of leaning toward a peachy sort of thing, to be honest with you. So yeah, that's really interesting in this one, aroma-wise. But yeah, beyond that, you do get the big, bright, juicy tangerine from the Mosaic, and you can smell that nice kind of oily, gooseberry, white-green grapey character of the Nelson Sauvin underneath there as well. As I say, this beer is kind of nothing unusual for me, aroma-wise, but it does smell pretty damn nice, and there's so many New England hazies out there these days, you can't ask for much more than that, to be quite frank. So yeah, as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer, but I think it is about time that we get stuck into this one and see what it's all about. So this one is the Solid Gold Jams, an 8% New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA, with Citra Mosaic, Nelson Sauvin, brewed at Brix City Brewing in, I forgot the name of the place in New Jersey. but a little bit further north of us here in Rahway, and then Magnify Brewing, who are from Fairfield in Essex County, a little bit closer to us here in Rahway. So yeah, let's get stuck into this one and see what it's all about. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's very nice. It actually has quite a little bit of impact flavour to it, this one. I get quite a little bit of citrus in the beginning, but then it just mellows out and gives you a big juicy character there. You always have to let your palate adjust a little bit when you try these beers, of course, but this is a really solid New England IPA, so it's a big thumbs up from me. I will say though, it comes across as being a little bit more oaty leaning in comparison to what the aroma had me believe. But yeah, you know, it's kind of interesting that some beers stick very well to what you would expect from the aroma, others like to diverge a little bit, and this one certainly does diverge a wee bit in terms of its malt base, but still really nice beer. Yeah, gives you everything you'd want. Lovely kind of creamy, juicy character, good little bit of green component, and quite a sweet malt base actually, but the impact flavour was the thing that was surprising. Let's see if we still get that. Yeah, I do find this beer a little bit sharp in its impact flavour. That's really interesting. But yeah, let's break this one down then and describe the flavour a little bit more in depth as we always do. So, middle third of your palate then, you can feel the backbone of this beer is that lovely kind of fresh white bready bread crust, like a hedgehog roll or something like that. That's definitely there. The further forward on that middle third of the palate you go, you do get a little touch of kind of dry woodiness in there, and a wee bit of a crackery note, and that's great. But then above that, you do actually get a little bit of that sweeter kind of wholemeal brown bready character coming out of the beer too. So yeah, lovely little bit of kind of wholemeal brown bready character in there, but above that, you very quickly get a more kind of fluffy white bread, and then above that you get the more dense character from the kind of wheaty white bread as well. So the middle third of your palate in this one is very layered, as you often find with this style, but it goes together really quite nicely. The wheaty character is actually a lot sort of smoother in the flavour than I suspected it was going to be from the aroma, but yeah, I think that goes together really nicely. So yeah, above the wheaty character you get the nice big kind of oaty creaminess as well. So yeah, the oaty creaminess, and so this beer is actually a bit fresher than I thought it was going to be from the aroma. So down the middle, down the kind of middle line of your tongue, if you like, on top of the wheaty layer, you do get that nice kind of creamy, oaty type character. And as you move out toward the edges of the palate, it's just that little bit lighter and more, as you say, it just gives you that little bit of a lighter, more dry, oaty note in there. And in the dead centre of your palate, you do get a little touch of that kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of note, and that is of course the alcohol in this beer. But yeah, I am wondering if there is a very light touch of like acidulated malt in this one, and maybe that's what's given the beer the kind of sharp impact that it has. I remember this from the Magic Rock beers from Huddersfield in Yorkshire back in the day. They like to use a little bit of that acidulated malt. Yeah, I do wonder that, just because from the mouthfeel as well, you do get this very slight acidity in the flavour, which gives you this almost very slightly waxy feel on your tongue. So I'm wondering that about this beer, if they have used a little touch of acidulated malt. I'd love to see the brew sheet for this beer and just see what they've done with it, because it certainly comes across as quite interesting. So yeah, I do like that about this one for sure. The malty character in the middle third of your palate is really interesting here. But let's go on to the back third of your tongue then. As I often say, sweeter flavours will come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours will come out a little bit further back. And remember, the back third of your palate is going to give you similar flavours, just at different intensities really, to the middle third of your tongue. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of kind of bready build up in there. Brown bread in the base and kind of white bread on top of that. The base of that back third of your palate, you've got the bread crust in there, which feels a little bit lighter and more dry, of course. Then you get the kind of crackery layer above that. Then you've got the wholemeal brown bread, which feels a little bit lighter and more airy. The white bready character, which feels a little bit lighter and more airy. Then you get the sort of wheaty notes creeping on top of that. And the wheaty notes do have a little bit more kind of like bite to them, as I was picking up from the aroma. But they do smoothen out quite nicely. That's the big surprise about this beer for me, is that the wheaty notes are not quite as bitey as they appeared they were going to be. You also get a little bit of the drier aspects of the oaty character just creeping over the top of that back third of the palate too. But then above everything else, you do of course have the yeasty side of this beer. So let's have a wee look at that. So yeah, for me, the yeasty side of this beer, this beer does actually have a wee bit of that almost like farmhousey character to it. The yeasty character is like a very dry, woody, crackery white bread, which I do quite like. So yeah, nice kind of dry, crackery white bread in there. Quite a little bit of woody character as well, and almost very slightly spicy. I don't get much in the way of honeycomb on the yeasty side of the beer, as I quite often do, particularly with this style. So yeah, the yeasty side of this beer is quite interesting, and definitely a bit more farmhousey than I thought. And on the back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, it condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the yeasty and malty side of this beer. Let's have a wee look at the hoppy side of things then. So, green component, back corners of the palate, definitely a little bit more kind of earthy for sure. As you move further forward, it's a little touch herbal. And then you've also got that little bit of, as you move further forward, it gives you do get a little bit of like floral dankness to this one, and it's a wee bit more spicy as you reach the kind of front corners of the palate. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, in that sense is quite nice, but it does feel, the green component feels quite wet and oily, which makes me wonder if they've maybe been using a little bit of incognito or cryo oil or something like that. And then round the front curve of the tongue, the beer is distinctly lighter and more grassy, I would say. You do get a good little bit of zestiness out of this one too, which I quite like. So yeah, that's quite interesting. But as I say, I do suspect a little bit of cryo oil or something like that in here. Front third of your palate then, just to round off the tasting section. So of course this is where the fruity side of the beer comes out. On that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you do get a little bit of that kind of bready build up once again. So yeah, for me, again, wee bit of brown bread in the base, a little bit of white bread above it. The base of that front third of your palate, again, you've got the bread crust in there, quite a bit of white bread, and then I get more of what I heavily suspect is acidulated malt in this one, because you get that waxy kind of acidity sitting on top of the malty side of that beer. But then you get the nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And for me, the fruity side of the beer is kind of what you'd expect, but as I say, you do have that quite citricy note from what I heavily suspect is acidulated malt. But yeah, fruity side of things then. Back of that front third of your palate. So yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, you get a stronger, more kind of grapefruity sort of thing coming out of it. There's also a little bit of a kind of passion fruit there, quite a pungent passion fruit. But then I am getting quite a little bit of a sharp peach out of this, which is going to be the Citra. These flavours that I've mentioned will be the Citra, definitely. And then as you move further forward toward the middle of that front third of your palate, it's definitely more kind of like a juicy mango, and underneath that you get a little bit of an apricot and papaya type character coming out of this one. There is a wee bit of that, but as soon as you move into the front half of that front third of your tongue, you can feel the oily gooseberry, white green grapey characters of the Nelson Sauvin, and then you have a bit of the kind of more oily and zesty tangerine character of the Mosaic sitting above that. I'd be curious as to whether this is a 33-33-33 ratio of hopping that they've done in here, but yeah, it really is quite kind of citricy, this one. So it could be that Citra is maybe 50% and the other two are 25%, but then again, pardon me, I do heavily suspect you've got acidulated malt in this, just because of the way it kind of pieces together actually. But an interesting beer. I like beers that test my palate, and this one certainly has done that, and we've drunk who knows how many New England hazies on the channel actually. But yeah, I think we can round off the review then with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel. So for me, mouthfeel wise, this beer, it's actually kind of mid-bodied, like right in the middle of the spectrum. The carbonation is quite smooth. It's got a lot of slickness to it, this one. And as I said earlier, it does have quite an impact flavour to it. Which, you know, I keep going on about acidulated malt, but that will be the reason for it. It does have this kind of sharp citricy impact, which gives it the kind of slickness. It's almost like tongue sweat a little bit. You will notice that in this beer. And it's that for me is the really quirky thing about this. I haven't had an IPA that's done this really since the Cannonball series from Magic Rock in Huddersfield in Yorkshire, and that was a good few years ago actually that we had that, maybe 6 years or something like that, 6 or 7. So this one really reminds me of those beers. But yeah, malty side of things then, it's got a bit of dryness underneath, a bit of smoothness in the middle, wee bit of kind of creaminess on top with a wee bit of sweetness, and as I say, you've got this acidulated malt kind of tongue sweaty type thing going on. In terms of your hoppy bitterness and stuff like that, this beer's a little bit harder to place because of that acidity that it has. For me, I think it's probably a fairly standard, like 40 IBUs. You know, 30 IBUs is the standard for a New England, but then if you take it up to double, it's about 40. If it's a triple, you do it to 50, just to kind of balance all the sweetness and stuff like that out. So I think it probably is calculated to be 40 IBUs. It does feel a little bit less bitter than that, but as I say, you've got tongue sweat in there. And then the fruity side of things is quite slick and oily. It's quite nicely balanced. You get more of the kind of gooseberry note from the Nelson Sauvin the further into the aftertaste you go, but a little bit of the kind of zesty character from the Mosaic is lingering. And it does actually make me think a little bit more of Amarillo. Amarillo always had a more zesty orange than Mosaic did. Mosaic was a bit softer and juicier for me than other orangey leaning hops. But then yeah, the Citra I think is quite prominent in this one. The grapefruit, the passion fruit and the peachy notes. So I'd be curious to see, I would be really curious to see what the brew sheet for this one, because this is a beer that's got a few thoughts going in my head. But the main question should always be, is it a nice beer? Yes, it is. But it reminds, for me, this is a bit nostalgic. It really is like the Magic Rock Cannonball series that I had back in the day 5 or 6 years ago. So this was quite a nice find actually. This was a recommendation from, I think the guy's name was Dan, at one of Dave's local beer shops here in Rahway in New Jersey. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This was the Solid Gold Jams, an 8% New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA, with Citra, Mosaic, Nelson Sauvin, brewed at Brix City Brewing in Little Ferry, I think it was, in the northern part of New Jersey, in collaboration with Magnify, who are from Fairfield, a little bit closer to us in Fairfield County. So yeah, let's leave it at that. Thank you again for watching. As always, check out my social media, check out the brewery's social media. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. This has been a really interesting one to try because it has tested my palate. But we'll see about doing some other stuff from Brix City, and I know that Magnify Brewing have made their way over to Scandinavia, so they're probably a little bit more accessible for me generally. But until the next time, slàinte, skål, cheers, solid gold jams, really, really nice New England double IPA. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.